Welcome. It's great to see you. Thanks for taking a little time to talk about church architecture and the theology behind it. Maybe we should just start with a quick prayer and then we'll kind of jump into it. And this might be more of an interactive session than previous sessions. We'll have to see how it goes. But I'm new here, so I don't know all the things, all the bells and whistles of the church and the intricacies of the symbolism. So if you have insight into that, I would encourage you to share with the rest of the group. We can talk in generalities till we're blue in the face, but I think at some point we've got enough time today to probably go and look at the specifics of our place here on Seabrook. But let's start with a quick prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Be our guide, O Lord, as we come to this place and as we try to make it a place that is welcoming to all. May the building and the symbolism and the architecture reveal your glory in our midst. Be an invitation to follow you and remind us, O Lord, of your presence through your well-beloved Son, in whose name we now pray. Amen.
Amen.
So, church architecture. So a couple of quick notes. We do have a pulpit. I don't know if you know that. We have a pulpit. It sits in the closet as you walk into the choir room. So if you ever want to look at our pulpit, you can go in the closet there. Don't spend too long in the closet, but you can look at the pulpit and then wonder why it's there, as I wonder. And if you're looking for a baptismal font, we have a baptismal font as well. We have the original bowl, which is a copper bowl. Where's my altar guild? There we go, which is the original copper bowl.
Yes,
right?
And that was, the copper came from the steeple.
And it came from the steeple when the hurricane came through in 2003 or 4.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of people here remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a beautiful bowl, and there's a date on it.
Yep.
Yes.
And that used to sit in a marble or granite placement
Yes.
that broke.
It did break.
Right.
It crumbled. I don't believe the original design was meant for it to be moved frequently as it has been since it came
Right.
to live here.
Right.
And it just gave up the ghost.
It gave up the ghost. And so one of the things Father Derek said during my interview process, at some point in the process, he said, well, there's a pulpit and there's a font, and I'm not putting it anywhere, I'm just waiting for the new rector. And I think he was anticipating me coming in like a whirlwind and just doing something with it. I'm not that is not how I'm trying to lead at this moment. So, and frankly, this session is partly born, I think it's an important session to talk about theological architecture, right? And to talk about place. But for me, it's also a session that has some pragmatic concerns to it. What do we do with some of the things that we need to have in the church, and how might we think about those things theologically first, and then kind of practically second? So
Build a museum.
Build a museum, yeah, the church. Steve, did you have something you wanted to?
I just wanted to ask, did you just say that our pulpit is in the closet?
It is in the closet, it is.
Far
It
away
is.
for the pulpit than our priest.
Right, yes, well, thank you, exactly. So, thank you. Alex got it. I know Alex got it, but that's okay. It's good.
That's my word.
Yeah, you just, with me, you have to listen between the lines sometimes. Good. We could talk a lot about church facade and church exteriors. Maybe we can touch on that in a minute. But as you walk into the church, there are two ways that we can begin a conversation about theological architecture. Talking about the horizontal plane, okay? So what's on the ground? How is the church organized? The building, I mean, how's the building organized? What's the shape of the floor print? And then on that floor print, how are the chairs or the pews arranged? And so if you look at Good Shepherd, quiz, quiz number 1. How is our floor plan arranged? What's the shape of our floor? It's a cross, right? It's a cruciform building, and it has what's called the nave, which is the central part where the chairs and the pews are. It has the chancel or the altar area up in the front, and then the 2 arms of the cross. Anyone? For 1,000 points? What are they called? The arms of the cross on either where the choir loft is in St. Martin's Chapel, because of the transept, right? Those are the transepts. Now, in a cathedral, those are often quite prominent. In our church, I would say it's pretty prominent in our church. You can tell it's a cross pretty quickly upon walking in. But that's the horizontal plane. As you look to the vertical plane, when you look up, then you have another kind of way of thinking about the symbolism and the architecture of the building. You look up, obviously, in our church, and we have quite a tall ceiling. And on our ceiling, we have rafters that are actually painted so that you can kind of discern what's going on up there. But there's actually there's some symbolism up there. Anyone have a sense of what that looks like when you look up? Yes? The bottom of a boat, right? So the bottom of a boat, an inverted boat. And why the bottom of a boat? I mean, just Larry, I'm looking at you, but
there's been plenty of boats in the Bible.
There are lots of boats. There are lots of boats. And Peter and the fishermen, and right, lots of boats in the Bible. And so in one way of thinking about it, some more medieval or classical churches are trying to create a little piece of heaven. They're trying to create an oasis, a place that is separate from the world. And so they try to make huge vaulted ceilings that kind of draw your eyes skyward as you walk into brilliant kind of stained glass lit naves. And the idea there being that you're entering into a spiritual, heavenly, otherworldly place. Good Shepherd has that at some level. I mean, we could kind of debate how we feel about that. But my understanding of Good Shepherd is you're in the boat with Jesus, right? You're getting into Noah's Ark. You're getting into Peter's boat, and we're kind of casting out to do the work that God has given us to do. A boat for me is more of a working image. It's a working metaphor, rather than you're coming in here as a place of pure respite and otherworldliness. Do you see what I'm kind of getting at a little bit? That's just my interpretation. We're the Episcopal Church. You can disagree all you want. You can no. The Good Shepherd Church is my heavenly place. Great, that's great. But when you think about the architecture, when you think about the building itself, you look at the horizontal and the vertical, and those tend to be the 2 big places you start when thinking about theological architecture. I'm going to talk about stained glass in just a second, but any thoughts about that, Joe?
I just have a question.
Yes.
Why the altars of Episcopal churches always typically in the east? I mean,
Sure.
I know we couldn't hear when we did the addition just
Sure.
because it's a spacious issue.
Yeah.
But why is that typically the way?
So the east is obviously toward Jerusalem. It's toward the Holy Land. From our vantage point, I mean, the world is circular, so that it falls apart at some point. But the idea being, and again, this is historically, church architecture has had what's called a high altar, and the high altar is against the wall. So this is actually east. So what we would do, and actually what you used to have before this building, was have an altar. I don't know, was it against the wall or was it pulled out? It was against the wall, and the priest would turn their back to you, and then would celebrate. And it's a very see, I'm way out of view. I'm sorry, Derek. I'm standing. I should look at myself more, but okay, there we go. Okay. So historically, and again, primarily out of the Roman Catholic Church, but also the Anglican, the Episcopal Church, other Lutheran, other churches that are more sacramental, we would say, that celebrate a Holy Eucharist in that particular way. The priest would turn, and the symbolism there is that we're all facing the same direction. We're all facing the Holy Land, and the priest is kind of your speaking on your behalf, right? It's the Eucharistic prayer is being said on your behalf, and that is together in a particular way. So after Vatican II, when was Vatican II? 50s, 60s? They changed that. They brought the altars out, away from the wall, and they wanted the priest to begin to face the congregation so that it was a little bit more of like a table, if you will. I mean, it's still an altar, but you got that sense that there was more intimacy between the priest and the people. Yeah, good. That's a good question.
It becomes more like the Last Supper.
Becomes more like the Last Supper, yeah.
So this was for all denominations?
No, it was primarily for sacramental. So Roman Catholics, Anglicans, Episcopalians, Lutherans, Methodists to some degree. Presbyterians Presbyterians don't have a high. It's like rag on Presbyterian Day. I'm sorry. I was ragging on the Presbyterians during the sermon. I don't know if I'm doing it at 10. I don't want to be mean, but I went to a Presbyterian school. My aunt's Presbyterian, but they just don't have a high sacramental theology, right? So what they pass. Anyway, this is not about the Presbyterian Church. So good. If my aunt's watching, love you, Aunt Sue.
Yeah, we had communion once every 3 months.
And remember though, the Episcopal Church until 1979, with our new prayer book, 44 years old, we used to do morning prayer on Sunday mornings. We would only do Eucharist once a week.
Once a month.
I mean, once a month. That's what I meant. Once a month, and we do morning prayer the other services. And so that's in church world, that's a fairly recent kind of change for us. Anything else, Joe?
No.
You're good with that?
So why did they change it from once a week to every week?
Well, because,
Once a month or once a
yeah, so the theology of the prayer book in the 70s, and again, when I say it's 79, it is the 79 prayer book, but it took 2 general conventions, which are every 3 years. So it took 6 years before that thing was passed, which means that this was really developed in the 60s and then was used for trial use in the early 70s, through the 70s, trial use, and then it was finally approved, first conditionally and then authorized. The reason is because they wanted to focus on the sacraments. So specifically, they wanted baptism and Eucharist to be the center of the Sunday morning experience. So morning prayer is great it's a prayer service, and a lot of churches still do that, and that's fine to do it. But the prayer book of 79 emphasized the importance of the the bread and the wine, the communion table, and then the baptism, which we'll get to in a second. Other questions? So we also have stained glass. Now, here again, different churches do it differently. There's a great church in North Carolina that's almost on the top of a mountain, and the altar has clear glass behind it. I don't know, I can't remember where it is. It's in the mountains. And you look out, as you look at the altar, you're actually looking out over this vast expanse of kind of mountainous wilderness.
You're looking for God.
Well, and so that church is, aesthetic is more wood. It's a wood church. It's simple. It's clean. Kind of simple. It's not carved wood and all this kind of stuff. The idea there is being that you're in nature with God, right? You're in nature with God. Whereas for us, we've made an interesting choice, right? Good Shepherd's been a both and kind of place. We've taken the new part of the church, which is the part after that back section, right? So at the crossing there, the first crossing when you walk in, all that in the new has the stained glass. And so we've covered the windows with stained glass as a way of telling the story of salvation, as a way of sharing part of nature, as a way of inviting sunlight in and kind of coloring it and having it dance around at different times of the day. And looking around, you get different, and again, I don't know, I've not studied the stained glass of our church yet, but as you walk around, different windows tell different pieces of the story. I believe the Good Shepherd window, I'm looking at America, is on the left.
Yes, so
to the cross.
The windows are situated in the church so that it tells the story chronologically. The one at the very first one on the left, when you go into the sanctuary, is the creation window, and then
Right.
it goes from there all the way around to, you'll see you have the prophets, then you get to the front altar area, and where a rose window would normally be, we have the Lord window,
Right.
which is the one that's centrally located over the altar.
Hmm.
And then you get into your New Testament windows on the other side.
On the Martin Chapel
At
side.
the top windows and the transepts are two of the sacramental rites, one of communion and the other of baptism.
Right.
And the light that shines, that beautiful light on the altar in the mornings, is from the Epiphany window, which no one can really see except the effects of it.
Right.
Unless you're standing on the altar, you see it every week, but most other people, unless they're walking away from the altar, don't
Right.
see that one.
Right.
We have a book in the narthex, and if you are interested in doing a self-guided walking tour of the windows, I am happy to provide you with a copy. Just come to the welcome desk after this, and I will hand you a copy, and you can do. I strongly recommend coming during the week when no one's in the church.
Hmm.
The silence of the church during the week is amazing, and it's just a wonderful way to acquaint yourself with the space if you want to do that.
Thank you. And Epiphany, of course, meaning, right, the light of Christ.
Yes.
And so to have that window shining the light at specifically at the Sunday morning hour. Come later in the day, the whole room changes because the light is coming now in through the front, or through the west side and on Seabrook, and it changes the whole kind of room. So stained glass is one of the ways in which, again, you make theological architectural choices about what kind of church building you want to be. Go ahead.
I want to say one other thing.
Yep.
Is that the windows that are done in the church since the remodel are all done from a company called McMahon Art Glass and Del Rey. The original church stained glass that was in the chapel is still there in what we now call the choir room. It is an entirely different kind of stained glass. It's a slab glass, very, very, very
Heavy.
dense glass that is just beautiful jewel tones. And then we have one other window, which is imported from, and Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, the Isle of Wight. Is that right? Your dad, did your dad
I
do
think it's
that?
the wrists.
Oh, the wrists. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. So we have a family who imported the Lazarus window, which is in the quiet room. Yet again, an entirely different style of stained glass, but just phenomenally beautiful. Go look at it inside or outside at night if it's lit. It's just
Right.
beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, in addition to we could spend the whole time just talking about glass, and then you have the rear part of the church. So this side, it's all clear. And if you notice, I don't really know what's on this side of the road. I always park on this side. So it's the columbarium, right? The columbarium is right outside of that window, and that window is all clear. And so what's the theology of having a clear window next to our columbarium? And as we kind of stand out, and the columbarium is where people's ashes are kept in niches. And I think there's a lot of symbolism around having that be clear so that we can see out into the columbarium at those who have gone before, those saints in light who have kept the faith and who are now, who are now with God in heaven. And as they kind of look in, again, don't push it too hard, but that there's a connection between the inside of the church and the columbarium on the outside of the church. And I think that's really poignant as well. But for me, I love the boat image. But for me, even without looking at all the stained glass, our church feels more kind of connected to nature through the glass. I don't know if that makes any sense. Just in the way I perceive of it, the way that the church is set up, the aesthetics, the size, and then the glass with the clear glass when you walk in, and then the colors when you get inside, kind of connects us to nature, even though we're right next to a road and all of that stuff. But you never really I don't ever hear the road. So so there you go.
The clear glass lets you see the bushes and stuff.
And the bushes, yeah.
You're right in
Yep.
the middle of nature.
That's right.
It's like the church that you were just describing.
Right.
You see
Yes.
the vistas.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Lord's vista.
Right. Other comments or questions about that? I want to move to specific items within the church. No? You're good? Okay, we're good on time. So, the altar, the pulpit, you've got a lectern as well, and then you've got the font, and then I would include the columbarium in this too. So where we place those things, and again, here the Reformation made a change. So the 16th century Reformation, Martin Luther and John Calvin and the gang, they made a change. And so when you go over to Europe, the change here is when you go into a Baptist church or many Presbyterian churches, other non-denominational churches, they will put something different in the front, in the center, which is what will they put in the center? The Protestants, the really hardcore Protestants, put the pulpit in the center, or they'll put a lectern in the center, because for them it was the preaching that was the center of the worship experience. It was the Word of God that was meant to be why we were gathered, and so while they might have an altar, it might be a more simple altar, it might be kind of further back, but the center often for many of the Reformation Protestants was the preaching. So, of course, in the Episcopal Church, we focus on the communion. So we put the altar front and center. And then we have a lectern, and that's what we currently have, which is typically where readings are done. And then we have the pulpit. And typically, you put the pulpit on one side and the lectern on the other. Derek and I were talking about which side goes which, and I don't know if it's a hard and fast rule, but generally, your pulpit is a bigger, beefier piece of furniture which ours is. It's got both the stand where you put your notes, and then it's got kind of it's not a modesty board, but it's a container that kind of holds you in there, and it's more elevated. So for us, if we were to put the pulpit in, you would traditionally put it just opposite the lectern. Now, my understanding, have you ever had the pulpit installed or no?
Yeah.
No.
It's never been installed, it's movable, so it's
Right.
not like a permanent fixture or anything. But it was always my understanding that the baptismal font traditionally goes in the northwest corner. So the pulpit, if you have it at the front of the church, the pulpit would be on the other side from that, right?
So northwest would be this side up there. So in between, you mean in the next to the Martin Chapel, up in the
Yeah, like up in that,
by the Episcopal flag?
yeah. Traditionally, that's, I believe, where,
You might be right. I'm not sure about that.
yeah.
Inter- What's that?
I thought they moved it to the front door,
So in terms of the baptismal font, you're right. Recent theology and recent church architectural thinking, and our bishop certainly advocates that the baptismal font goes as close to the entryway of the church as you can get it, with the idea being that since baptism is the initiation rite into the church, it's how we become Christians, we put the baptismal font close to where your new people are coming, right? You don't make them go all the way up front in order to be baptized. You baptize them kind of like what we do now. We baptize them at that crossing in the middle, and it's right there. Now for us, this is where the theology of it and the practicality of it you have to negotiate that a bit, because, well, do you want to put a baptismal font there, and then what does it look like, and how big is it, and then people have to walk around it. Some priests and bishops really like it being in the way. They want you to have to negotiate your way around a font. I don't think I'm one of those priests. For me, I think there's some space either in the back, opposite the, still on the northern side. What do we call that on the southern side? The altar or table there on the left? Do we? What's that called?
Table on the left.
Where we put the offering plates? In the back on the left?
I don't have one.
I don't have any.
It's just a table. Okay, well, the very fancy table on the left, and then you have the temporary or movable table on the right, the old wood table. Joe?
And I spoke to Bob Taylor about when the fonts sort of crumbled.
Yeah.
His intention, or what he really wanted to do, was to actually plumb it in,
Right.
put water in it,
Yep.
into where that temporary wood table is, and have sort of the living waters always flowing.
Right.
And so that was kind of the thought, but that was his sort of ultimate sort of dream of being able to have the water always moving and have it plumbed in.
Right. Good.
In that spot.
Well, I like the Taylor doctrine, but I also like the America doctrine too. You know, but I think the dead center creates traffic flow questions that and then, do you move some pews or do you cut pews? I don't know. So all of those things begin to be a bit of a hairy situation. I will tell you at St. Mark's, when we redid the sanctuary and the sanctuary, the nave, and then we turned a chapel into a baptistry. So a baptistry is actually a room or a building that holds a baptismal font, but the room itself is designated for baptisms. So we turned the side chapel into the baptistry by putting a permanent font in that had a motor and a recycling water fountain piece where the water would come up the middle, fill the bowl, and then the bowl would like beautifully overflow. I asked that it have a water heater in it as well. That did not make it. So the water's ice cold, but it recycles itself, and the sexton has gotten really good at adjusting the motor so that it doesn't splash everywhere and it has to be drained and cleaned out. It's a lot of work when you have it plumbed in.
Isn't that an enclosed area at St. Mark's?
It used to be totally enclosed. They removed there used to be these kind of movable panels. They took those out. So it's in the back corner of the church itself, but it's connected and it's open to the back, but it's its own room. Yes.
To me, that sounds a bit Roman.
Yes.
Because
The baptistry?
Yeah.
Yeah, the baptistry.
The whole idea of a separate place,
room, right.
because that was the tradition in the Roman church.
Right.
That evidently, probably because the child, the baby, whoever was being baptized was not Roman
Right.
yet, and so they wouldn't be able to go into the church or
Right.
something like that.
Right.
And so it was, we had 2 children that were baptized that way, and I felt I was the non-Catholic. I felt as though we were so unwelcome.
Right.
I just don't.
They kept you in a separate building.
Asking for ideas.
Right. Well, no, I'm not planning on building a separate building for a baptistry. That's not on the cards for me.
I do love the idea that, anyway, we won't go into it.
But so in my mind, you could put it, the Taylor doctrine, the back right, as you walk in.
Or the northwest corner.
Or you could put it, the Seeley doctrine, you put it all the way up front on the right.
The ceiling doctrine.
Kind of in that. And those 2 areas are big. When you're up at communion next time, just take a look over to the right and to the left. Those are big plots of real estate that are just empty. So, whether that's just the way we want it or whether we want to do something else. And then, and then there's the movable font, which our altar guild head does not like that idea. And then there's a smaller, more slimline font that you could put either at when you first walk in, or you could put it at the middle. Well, I guess you could put it in the narthex too. I was down at All Saints in Fort Lauderdale, and they had suffered from arson at their church recently. And so when they were rebuilding the church, they put the baptismal font in the narthex. And it's it's this beautiful mosaic with living water, pumped water, but it's in the narthex. And so they made a very, bold choice with that. Again, that might be too bold for my taste, but
Baptism.
I don't know how they did it. I know at St. Mark's we had 2 high-def cameras in there, and then we would actually throw it up on the screen from doing it. It was connected, but we could throw it up on the screen so that everyone in the church could see.
I like having it in the back.
The back, yeah. It's so
Yeah.
you can get really dogmatic about it. You could be like, we got to do the right theology, and it has to be in the But then you start looking at the space, and you look at the cost, and you look at a lot of other practical, the cleanup, You look at other practical concerns, and suddenly those things start to jockey in your theological mix. And I think when we get to that point, we'll do the jockey and do the dance and figure it out. So when did the font break? When was that?
Last year.
Last year.
It was only last year. Okay.
So the problem is, it was empty. They're just virtually empty, and there are 4 marble slabs that were just sort of glued together
Right.
with this, and very, very heavy.
Right.
And it was not on wheels, so in order to move it, you had to kind of
Drag it.
jiggery-pokery it, around the place. And so it would go from one end to the middle, to the back, to the front, and it just, it couldn't withstand that sort of movement.
Right. Right.
So if we do want movable baptismal font, I suggest we put it on some sort of sturdy wheels.
Right. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I personally like the idea of a permanent fixture and something that has some. I do like the idea of water, moving and stuff. But again, you've got to be a little. I think as a priest, we've got to be a little flexible, right? You can't just be so strong-headed that you just barrel through any kind of practical concerns. But maybe that's a way to do it. Go ahead.
This is sort of a non sequitur at this point.
Yeah.
I'm still back to the pulpit.
Yeah, the pulpit.
Why is it sitting in the choir room?
I just think it never
I don't
got
understand.
installed, right? I mean, did it never? I think one of the concerns is practical. It's that the stairs are steep, and you'd actually need it doesn't quite fit on the communion rail level. It's too tight. We wouldn't be able to serve communion if we put that right.
Why is it built that big?
Yeah.
It was
I don't get it.
From the other church.
Oh, from the old church.
It was when the church faced that way.
Right.
Got you.
Right.
Okay, okay.
So you need to build some sort of platform
I see.
on the stairs so that you could actually kind of step out into the, but be over
Right.
the stairs and all of this.
Right.
And I'm not opposed to bringing a pulpit in. I mean, I
like pulpits.
the pulpit's nice and
It's also been the tradition, it's been the preference of our rectors before to walk out into the people to deliver their sermon.
right.
So being
That makes sense
constrained in a pulpit
Right.
wasn't their style.
too. Right.
So that was another reason why there wasn't any urgency to.
Move it.
It didn't rise to that level.
And we used to, the priest, when he baptized,
Mm.
would then take the baby and walk up the aisle in the church.
Right.
And introduce the baby to, as a new Christian,
Right.
to all the church members. And I thought that was beautiful, and I hope we do it again.
And now that I have 4 nieces and nephews, yes, I'm carrying the football. So we've got and the altar is the altar. I mean, I don't know if there's much to say about the altar other than it's a very beautiful altar and it shall be for long time. So the altar, the font, the pulpit, we've got the lectern, and then the other thing that I'd like to just throw out there is, and again, theologically, I'm not sure I have a very compelling case here, but the choir loft. And the choir, as you know, is located in the transept, the south transept, and they sing due north. They're total due north. And they're kind of tucked back a little far. And so, one thought that I've had is, well, if you're rejiggering, if you're building a baptismal font and you're thinking about a pulpit and, we're moving some things, do you move the choir in some particular way? Even just moving it out to the edge of the transept instead of being so tucked back. Do you, if we follow the Seeley doctrine and we put the baptismal font, that's going to be, if you put the font, if you put the font on the right-hand side, you put the choir, are you able to build something for the choir behind the altar rail on the left-hand side? I don't know. Those are just thoughts I've had. I don't have a strong sense of it. Or do you just adopt, as we've kind of been doing, do you adopt technology to amplify the choir, from back there?
Maybe you turn, instead of having them go this way, put them on a little angle facing.
Yeah, you could put them on an angle. And, I think the choir, Emily, maybe you can help me. Is the choir...
The new microphones, so I think microphones would do a good job.
the microphones help, but the choir loft could probably seat 20 or 25 people, right? I mean, it's a fairly sizable number of pews. And it would be it's very aspirational. It's good.
Yes,
It's good.
But I think there is sort of a problem with, Tim not being able to see all the choir.
Well, right. You've got to make sure that,
Yeah.
the organ and the piano all sync together. So, again, these are not like, oh, we're doing something in July. Like these are things that we will need to think about for a while before we do anything. Yes.
The flip side of that is you can come into the church as a brand new person and you can sit in the back on the left and never see the choir. You hear them, but you have no idea.
Right. Where they are. Right.
It's kind of unnerving.
Right. Well, and Good Shepherd also made, a choice in not putting pews in the first 3 rows. We put chairs, thinking that we can move those and adjust those and change those, and so that's the other piece of all this, is that how you arrange your pews. And again, we went with a very traditional cruciform shape and pews. The cathedral in Miami has gone, in the last year under their new provost, they've taken out all their pews and they have replaced them with chairs so that they can have functions and, they can move chairs and all of that.
Like the Orthodox Church, we never had pews. We
Because you
had
stand most of the time, don't
stand
you?
or kneel.
Yeah,
And the choir was in a balcony,
right.
is in a balcony.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sometimes in the back.
right.
Some, and our was always in the
Yeah,
back.
and then it shoots up toward the,
Yeah.
noise goes toward the altar.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And the other thing the thing I'm most eager to do, that I see as the lowest hanging fruit, is actually to beautify the columbarium. So I would really like to just get that. I'd love us to get some greenery in there and kind of build that out to what the original intent had been. The pergolas are the one rotted already, and so we've got that whole area needs some attention. And we have it's not memorial funds. It's kind of reserved account for columbarium use.
It's the Memorial Garden Reserve.
Memorial Garden Reserve. Yeah, thank you. And so that is on my short list of getting that. So if you're passionate about the columbarium then please come and talk to Marika all about that. And she's gonna spend a lot of time. And Joe will come in, and hours and hours later you can emerge with a plan, and then we can chat. So
It'll be another America Joe doctrine.
yes, let them come up. But I think that's easy. That's easy because that's just some plants and maybe a little wood architecture that I don't think that requires us to redo concrete and all sorts of stuff. Jeannie, did you want to say something else? Just in the last minute?
About the design of the interior of the churches. Another wonderful one that was very creative is the cathedral in Philadelphia.
Yes.
I mean,
It was done by Richard Giles.
Yes.
and it's very, you do a lot of moving. You
Right.
move from place to place, which is really,
Yeah.
it's very spiritual. I mean,
Mhm.
That's,
you feel it.
in big cathedrals, that's part of,
Yeah.
that is the walking around and moving around in a vast space sort of harkens to the whole pilgrimage concept,
It is,
where
it is,
people
yes.
who can't always go on pilgrimage, but when you go to church, there's an ambulatory, there are places up at the front where you can walk around, and, that's very intentional.
So the last thing I want to say is to kind of bring us back into our purpose. So we've talked about theology, we've talked about the history of theology, we've talked about some of the practical and pragmatic concern, we've talked about some particular fixtures that we're looking at here at Good Shepherd. But the final piece that I want to end on is to ask ourselves, who is this for? And when we think about even the columbarium, right? Who is this for? Is this for the people in the ashes that are in the niche? Are we trying to impress them? Is it for the people who are coming to visit? Is it for those of us who sit in the pews or stand at the altar to remember our ancestors and the saints in light? So asking ourselves at each step of this process, who are we ministering to by our architecture? What's the story we're telling, but really who's the intended recipient of that story? And if we're doing it just for ourselves, then that's fine. That's a decision we can make, right? We can say, no, this is for us, and we're in our little piece of heaven here in Tequesta, Florida, and that's great. But I want us to be transparent about that. But if, like the baptismal font conversation, we're doing this for the saints to come, those who are going to be baptized, so that they have access to, we have a place for you here at Good Shepherd, how does that change some of our thinking and our plans for what we plan on doing with particular architectural pieces? And not just the church, but the campus as a whole. How does our campus, how does each part of our campus serve a particular purpose for a particular, with a particular people in mind? And I'm not saying that we have to have an exclusive sense of that. I mean, you can have multiple purposes and multiple audiences that you have in mind. But I think we don't want to forget that part of the equation, because at the end of the day, if we do something just because we kind of like how it looks or because we think we're being doctrinally correct, I think we've missed an opportunity to speak to a particular group of us, or those of us who are to come, and I think that's a great gift that we have, even as we, find ourselves with full parking lots and, we're sharing space with furniture, showrooms and stuff like that. It's a great problem to have, because it shows the life and vitality of this place and the future of the church.
And our little chapel on the right.
And St. Martin's Chapel.
Yeah, and it's just a wonderful place, and since we go there for healing services.
Right.
And for healing, it almost gives you a spiritual sense of peace.
Yes.
When you're there.
Yes. Good. Well, I have somewhere to be. Good luck with your day. I'll see you in church if you're coming to 10 o'clock. Goodbye, online world. Wonderful to see you as well.
Thank you.